Charlotte Reed had spent $400,000 on private tutors enrichment programs and the most elite prep school in Manhattan. None of it worked. Her 8-year-old daughter barely spoke at dinner, never smiled during lessons, and showed zero interest in learning. Then one afternoon, Charlotte found a worksheet tucked inside Lily's backpack, college-level algebra, solved in crayon, every answer correct. When she demanded to know who taught her, Lily said 5 words that changed everything. The janitor in the basement. A black single father who mopped floors for a living was doing what no expert could. Now let me ask you something before we go any further. If you were Charlotte, a woman who has spent years and a small fortune building the perfect system for her daughter's education, and you just found out that a janitor accomplished in a few weeks what your entire team of experts could not, what would you do? Would you be grateful, suspicious, angry? Hold that answer in your mind, because what Charlotte did next set off a chain of events that no one, especially her, saw coming. Charlotte did not confront Lily right away. She stood in the doorway of her daughter's room holding the worksheet and studied the girl who sat cross-legged on the bed, pretending to read a book she had not turned a page of in 20 minutes. $400,000. That was what Charlotte had invested in Lily's education over the past 3 years, the Mandarin tutor on Mondays, and Wednesdays, the Columbia graduate student who came for advanced reading on Tuesdays, and Thursdays the Friday piano instructor, who charged $300 an hour and once played at Carnegie Hall. Every minute between school dismissal and bedtime was scheduled logged in a shared calendar Charlotte reviewed each Sunday night. She had built a system around her daughter the same way she had built Whitfield Technologies, with structure, precision, and the absolute belief that excellence was engineered, never accidental. And Lily had responded to all of it by disappearing inside herself. Her teachers called her disengaged. Her reading tutor used the word resistant. At home, the girl drifted through rooms, like someone passing through a train station, present in body already gone in every way that mattered. Charlotte had told herself it was a phase. Children grew out of phases. 11 parenting books on her nightstand confirmed this. But the worksheet in her hand told a different story. She unfolded it again. The equations were not simple. They involved variables, coefficients, patterns that escalated in complexity across the page. Charlotte had majored in economics at Yale, and even she would need a moment with some of these. Yet every answer was correct, written in Lily's unmistakable handwriting. The uneven loops, the backwards 4s, the green crayon pressed so hard it left grooves in the paper. Lily. Charlotte kept her voice measured. Who taught you this? Lily looked at the worksheet. Something crossed her face, not guilt or fear, but a flash of quiet pride she immediately tried to suppress. A friend, she said. What friend this is, algebra? Your tutor hasn't even started pre-algebra with you. Lily pulled her knees to her chest. She seemed to weigh something internally, and then she made her choice. His name is Daniel. He works downstairs in the basement. He cleans the building. She said it simply, the way children state facts they do not yet understand are complicated. He doesn't really teach me, Mom. He just talks about things and I figure them out. He uses the mop bucket to explain fractions. He showed me how the floor tiles make patterns that are actually math. Charlotte stared at her daughter. He says math is just the language the world uses when it thinks nobody's listening, Lily added, and for the first time in months, her eyes were bright. Charlotte did not sleep that night. She lay in the dark of her bedroom in the Upper East Side apartment, turning the situation over like a stone she could not find the smooth side of. A custodial worker, unsupervised contact with her child in a basement. Every instinct shaped by 15 years of corporate risk management told her to shut it down immediately, call the building manager, reassign the man, enroll Lily in yet another program with yet another credentialed expert. But something else kept surfacing, something that had nothing to do with risk assessment. It was the look on Lily's face, that brightness. Charlotte could not remember the last time she had seen it. She arrived at Whitfield Technologies the next morning at 7:15, a full hour before her first meeting. Instead of going to her office on the 42nd floor, she took the elevator to the basement level and walked to the security station. "I need Corridor B footage," she told the guard on duty. "Maintenance area. Pull everything from October through last week." The clips loaded on a monitor that hummed with age. Charlotte leaned forward in the dim room and watched. Lily first appeared at the 11-minute mark of the October footage. The girl hovered at the edge of the frame school bag, clutched to her chest, watching a tall black man in a gray custodial uniform mopping the corridor. He noticed her set the mop against the wall and crouched down to meet her at eye level. Charlotte could not hear their conversation, but she could see Lily pointing at the floor tiles, the hexagonal pattern that ran the length of the basement corridor. The man reached into his pocket, pulled out a piece of chalk and drew something on the concrete wall. Shapes, arrows, numbers. Lily watched with an intensity Charlotte had never seen during any tutoring session, then took the chalk and added to the diagram herself. The man studied what she had drawn, and a small smile crossed his face, not broad or performed, but the involuntary kind that comes from genuine surprise. Charlotte fast-forwarded. Week after week, the same pattern. Lily came down during breaks, always during the window when her after-school minder, Miss Alvarez, took her coffee. Daniel never sought Lily out, never led her to any closed room. They stayed in the open corridor, visible to every passing employee. He drew on walls. She asked questions. Some days she brought him crumpled papers covered in numbers, and he reviewed them with the seriousness of a colleague examining a peer's research. In a clip from November, Charlotte watched her daughter laugh. Not the polite half-smile Lily offered dinner guests, but a real laugh, head thrown back, shoulders shaking. Daniel had lined up a row of cleaning spray bottles and was rearranging them like chess pieces to demonstrate some concept Charlotte could not identify. Lily clapped her hands, grabbed a bottle, and placed it at the end of the row with the confidence of someone who understood exactly where it belonged. Charlotte replayed that clip 3 times. She closed the security feed and sat alone in the dim room. The fluorescent light above her buzzed faintly, and somewhere in the building an elevator chimed. Her daughter was alive down there. That was the only way Charlotte could describe it. In every tutoring session, in every structured lesson Charlotte had arranged, Lily was a passenger. But in that basement corridor, sitting on the concrete floor, with a man who cleaned toilets for a living, she was present. She was curious. She was herself. Charlotte took the elevator back to the 42nd floor and went directly into the weekly technology briefing. Nathan Briggs, the head of engineering, was already mid-presentation when she sat down. He was walking the leadership team through a system update on the company's core AI platform, the proprietary predictive engine that powered Whitfield's most lucrative contracts. A junior engineer named Kevin raised his hand. "We're still seeing instability in the core architecture," he said, pulling up a diagnostic chart that showed irregular error patterns. "The original framework uses a methodology that's not documented anywhere in our internal records. Whoever built the foundation used logic that none of us fully understand." Nathan cut him off with a practiced smile. "Legacy systems always have quirks. We'll patch around it. That's why we have a 20-person engineering team." Kevin looked unconvinced, but said nothing more. Charlotte noted the exchange, a minor technical concern filed away in the back of her mind, alongside 100 other operational details. She had a more immediate problem. After the briefing, she returned to her office and opened the company's HR database. Daniel Carter, hired 14 months ago, night and weekend custodial staff. Emergency contact listed as Marcus Carter, his son. Education field high school diploma. Employment history blank. References none. On paper, the man was invisible. No past, no credentials, no trace of a life before he picked up a mop at Whitfield Technologies. Charlotte almost closed the file. The responsible thing, the system-approved thing, was to contact building management, request a reassignment, and move on. She could find Lily another enrichment program, something with proper oversight and measurable outcomes. she could restore order. Instead, she opened a second browser window and navigated to the academic research database Whitfield maintained through its R&D division. She typed in his full name, Daniel James Carter. The results appeared in under 3 seconds. Charlotte read them once. Then she read them again slowly because what she was seeing did not align with anything she thought she knew. Daniel James Carter, Ph.D. in Computer Science from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, former lead researcher at Monarch AI Labs, author or co-author of 37 peer-reviewed papers on neural network architecture, collective citation count over 12,000, named in Technology Review's 35 Innovators Under 35 9 years ago, recipient of the Turing Fellowship, one of the most prestigious awards in the field. And then, 6 years ago, everything stopped. The publications ceased. The affiliations vanished. Conference appearances, collaboration credits, grant applications, all of it disappeared, as if someone had taken an eraser to his entire professional existence. Daniel James Carter had been one of the most brilliant minds in artificial intelligence, and then he had simply ceased to exist in every record that mattered. Charlotte sat very still. The man who mopped her basement floors held a doctorate from MIT. The man who taught her daughter algebra with spray bottles and chalk had once been celebrated as a generational talent. Something was deeply wrong. Not with Daniel, with the world that had allowed him to fall this far without anyone noticing or caring. Charlotte looked at the research database one more time, then at the HR file still open in the adjacent tab. 2 versions of the same man separated by 6 years of silence. The gap between them was vast and dark, and Charlotte understood with the instinct that had made her a CEO before she turned 40 that whatever lay inside that gap would not be simple. She could walk away, close both tabs, call the building manager, protect her schedule and her daughter and her company's liability. Or she could do something she almost never did, abandon the system and follow the question. Charlotte closed the HR file. She kept the research database open. Then she picked up her phone, canceled her afternoon meetings, and began to search. Charlotte spent the next 3 days pulling threads. She started with Monarch AI Labs, the company listed as Daniel's last employer. Monarch had been a mid-sized artificial intelligence research firm based in Cambridge, Massachusetts, well-funded, respected in academic circles, and known for attracting talent that larger corporations often overlooked. Daniel had joined them straight out of his doctoral program at MIT, and within 2 years, he had become the lead researcher on their most ambitious project, a self-learning neural network architecture designed to identify patterns in massive datasets with a speed and accuracy that no existing system could match. The project had a name. It was called Meridian. Charlotte felt something cold settle in her stomach as she read that word. Whitfield Technologies had acquired the Meridian framework 5 years ago through a licensing deal brokered by a man named Richard Hale, a former Monarch executive who had been credited as the system's original architect. Hale had leveraged that credit into a consulting empire, and Whitfield had paid him handsomely for what they believed was his intellectual property. Meridian was not just any system. It was the backbone of Whitfield's entire predictive analytics platform, the engine that powered their most lucrative government and corporate contracts. It was the reason Charlotte's company was worth what it was. And according to every academic record Charlotte could find, the man who had actually built it was currently mopping floors in her basement. She spent the rest of that week piecing together a timeline. The picture that emerged was not complicated. It was brutal in its simplicity. 6 years ago, Daniel Carter's son Marcus had been diagnosed with a congenital heart condition that required immediate surgery and long-term monitoring. Marcus was 4 years old at the time. Daniel had no wife, no partner, no extended family nearby, just himself, and a boy whose heart was failing. He took emergency leave from Monarch to be with his son through the surgery and the months of recovery that followed. While Daniel was gone, Richard Hale, his direct supervisor at Monarch, filed a patent for the Meridian architecture under his own name. He restructured the research team, removed Daniel's access credentials, and presented the work to Monarch's board as solely his own creation. By the time Daniel was ready to return, there was nothing to return to. His name had been scrubbed from internal documents. His co-authors on the original papers had either left the company or been reassigned. Hale had built an airtight narrative. He was the genius behind Meridian, and Daniel Carter was a junior contributor who had abandoned the project. Daniel tried to fight it. Charlotte found fragments of this effort in public records, a complaint filed with the United States Patent and Trademark Office, a letter to MIT's Ethics Board, a single consultation with an intellectual property attorney in Boston. But fighting a patent dispute required money Daniel did not have. Marcus's medical bills were already consuming everything he earned. The attorney wanted a retainer of $50,000. Daniel could not afford it, so he stopped fighting. He let the world believe what Richard Hale wanted it to believe. And he took the only job he could find that offered health insurance comprehensive enough to cover a child with a chronic heart condition, a custodial position at a commercial building in Manhattan. 14 months ago, that building became Whitfield Technologies' headquarters. Charlotte closed her laptop and walked to the window of her office on the 42nd floor. Below her, Manhattan stretched out in every direction, steel and glass and ambition, a city built on the promise that talent rises. She had believed that promise her entire life. It was the foundation of every speech she had given, every hiring decision she had made, every justification for the system she had built. And 42 floors below her, a man with a doctorate from MIT and a stolen legacy was cleaning bathrooms so his son could see a cardiologist. Charlotte did not go home at her usual time that evening. She went to the basement. She found Daniel in Corridor B, exactly where the security footage had shown him every day for the past 14 months. He was wiping down the wall near the storage closet, the same wall where faint traces of chalk equations were still visible beneath the cleaning solution. He looked up when he heard her footsteps. His expression was neutral, careful, the face of a man who had learned to read situations before they read him. "Mr. Carter," Charlotte said. "I'm Charlotte Reed." "I know who you are, ma'am." His voice was low and steady. He did not stop wiping the wall. Charlotte looked at the chalk marks beneath his cloth. "My daughter has been coming to see you." Daniel's hand stilled on the wall. He straightened up and met her eyes directly. "She started showing up a few months ago. I didn't invite her. She saw me working through a problem I was sketching out during a break, and she asked what I was doing. She's sharp. She picks things up faster than most adults I've known." "You've been teaching her advanced mathematics." "I've been answering her questions," Daniel said. "There's a difference." Charlotte studied him. He stood with the quiet dignity of someone who had been underestimated so many times that he no longer wasted energy trying to correct it. His uniform was clean and pressed, and, his hands were steady. He did not look away from her. "I looked into your background," Charlotte said. She watched his face for a reaction. There was none, just a slight tightening around his jaw, as if he had been expecting this conversation for a long time and had already decided how much of himself he was willing to offer. "Then you know I'm overqualified for this job," he said quietly. "I know you built Meridian." The name landed between them like a stone dropped into still water. Daniel looked at her for a long moment. Then he set down his cleaning cloth, folded it neatly, and placed it on the supply cart beside him. "Yes," he said, "I did." And Richard Hale took credit for it. Daniel said the next words without bitterness, without drama. He said them the way someone describes weather that has already passed. "He filed the patent while my son was in surgery. By the time Marcus was stable enough for me to leave the hospital, it was done. My name was gone. My access was revoked. Hale told the board I had abandoned the project voluntarily." Charlotte asked him why he didn't fight it. Daniel looked at her with an expression that was not anger, but something closer to exhaustion, the kind that lives in the bones. Fight it with what I had a 4-year-old with a hole in his heart and medical bills that would take me a decade to pay off. I had no savings, no family money, no connections willing to go up against a man with Monarch's legal department behind him. I talked to a lawyer. He said I had a strong case, but I'd need $50,000 just to get started and the process could take years. He picked up his cloth again. My son needed me to be present, not buried in a courtroom. So I made a choice. Charlotte heard something in those last 4 words that she recognized the weight of a decision that cost everything, and that the person who made it would make again without hesitation. She started to say that he could have gone to another company, that his credentials should have opened doors, but Daniel was already shaking his head. "My credentials don't exist anymore," he said simply. Hale made sure of that. He didn't just take the patent, he rewrote the narrative. In every database that matters, I'm a footnote, a junior researcher who left the field. Nobody returns from that. Not without money, not without advocates. He looked at the wall where faint chalk lines still showed through the cleaning solution. I needed a job with benefits that would cover Marcus's cardiology appointments and his medication. This building offered full medical coverage for custodial staff working weekend and night shifts. So here I am. Charlotte said nothing for a moment. She was recalculating not just the facts, but her own assumptions, the quiet architecture of beliefs she had built her career on. The system rewards talent. Hard work rises. People end up where they deserve to be. Daniel Carter destroyed every one of those assumptions simply by existing in this corridor with a mop in his hand. Before she could respond, the service door at the end of the hallway opened and a boy walked in. He was around 10, thin but bright-eyed, wearing a backpack covered in NASA stickers and carrying a worn notebook under his arm. He moved with the easy energy of a child who had learned to make any space feel like home. "Dad, I finished the robot sketches you asked for," the boy announced, holding up the notebook. Then he saw Charlotte and stopped, suddenly aware that his father was not alone. "Marcus, this is Ms. Reed," Daniel said. "She runs the company." Marcus straightened up in the way children do when they want to seem older. "Nice to meet you, ma'am." He turned back to his father and opened the notebook to a page filled with detailed pencil drawings, mechanical figures with labeled parts arrows, showing joint movement notes in a child's handwriting, explaining how each mechanism was supposed to work. The designs were sophisticated for a 10-year-old. They were sophisticated for most adults. "These are wonderful," Charlotte said, and she meant it. Marcus beamed. "My dad designs them and I draw them. He's the best engineer in the world, but he says right now he has a more important job." Charlotte looked at Daniel. He was watching his son with an expression she had never seen in any boardroom, unguarded, tender, completely without pretense. At that moment, footsteps echoed from the far end of the corridor. Lily appeared, backpack bouncing clearly on her usual route to find Daniel during Miss Alvarez's coffee break. She stopped when she saw her mother, her face instantly closing like a door pulled shut. But then she saw Marcus, and the door opened again. "Are those robots?" Lily asked, looking at the notebook in Marcus's hands. Marcus held it out to her. "Yeah, my dad invents them and I figure out how they'd look. You want to see the flying one?" Lily moved to Marcus's side and bent over the notebook, and within seconds, the two children were talking over each other, Lily asking about the math behind the propulsion system Marcus had drawn, Marcus asking if she could calculate the wing ratio. Daniel watched them with that same quiet expression. Charlotte watched all 3 of them and felt something shift inside her chest, a gear turning that she had not known was stuck. She left the basement without saying goodbye to Daniel. She needed to think, but thinking did not happen on her terms. 2 days later, the decision was made for her. Charlotte was called into an emergency session with 3 members of Whitfield's board of directors. Gerald Simmons. The board chair sat at the head of the conference table with the grim expression of a man delivering a verdict he had already decided. "Charlotte, we need to discuss a personnel matter." Simmons slid a printed photograph across the table. It was a still from the security footage, Charlotte standing in the basement corridor talking to Daniel. This was flagged by our facilities manager. You were seen having an extended conversation with a custodial employee, alone, in a restricted area. Corridor B is not restricted, Charlotte said evenly, and I'm allowed to speak with employees at any level of the organization. Of course you are, said Helen Garrett, the board's risk management liaison, in a tone that meant the opposite. But there are optics to consider. Word has reached us that your daughter has also been spending unsupervised time with this same employee. You understand how this looks. Charlotte understood exactly how it looked. She also understood that what it looked like and what it was were two entirely different things. Simmons leaned forward. We're not making accusations. We're managing risk. The recommendation is simple: reassign the employee to a different facility and ensure your daughter has no further contact with him. This stays internal, no harm done. Charlotte asked what would happen if she disagreed with that recommendation. Simmons exchanged a glance with Garrett. Charlotte, you have a company to run. The Meridian platform is showing instability. Kevin's team flagged it again this morning. We have a $200 million Department of Defense contract under review. This is not the time to create distractions. Charlotte sat in that conference room and felt the walls of her own system closing around her. She had spent her career building structures designed to manage risk, eliminate variables, and produce predictable outcomes. Now that same structure was asking her to erase a man whose only crime was existing in the wrong place with the wrong skin color and the wrong job title. She agreed to the board's recommendation. She told herself it was temporary, a strategic retreat, not a surrender. She would find another way to address Daniel's situation, but right now the company needed stability. That evening she sat on the edge of Lily's bed and tried to explain. I need you to stop going to the basement, Charlotte said. She kept her voice gentle, though the words felt like stones in her mouth. Daniel is a good person, but it's not appropriate for you to be spending time down there without supervision. I'm going to find you a new tutor, someone with the right qualifications who can challenge you the way you deserve. Lily did not argue. She did not cry or raise her voice or ask why. She simply looked at her mother with an expression that Charlotte would remember for a very long time, the look of a child who has learned once again that the things that matter most to her are the first things adults will take away. Okay, Mom, Lily said. She picked up the book she had not been reading and opened it to a random page. Over the following 2 weeks, Lily returned to exactly what she had been before Daniel, silent, polite, and unreachable. She attended her tutoring sessions without complaint. She completed her homework without error and without interest. She stopped doodling equations on napkins. She stopped asking questions at dinner. The brightness Charlotte had seen in the security footage, that laugh, that aliveness was gone, replaced by the careful blankness of a child who had learned to stop wanting things. Charlotte watched it happen and told herself she had made the right decision. Then the system crashed. It happened on a Thursday morning without warning. The Meridian platform, the engine that powered every predictive model Whitfield Technologies sold to its clients, began producing catastrophic errors. Outputs that should have been accurate within a fraction of a percent were suddenly off by orders of magnitude. The engineering team scrambled to isolate the problem, but they could not find it. The instability that Kevin had warned about for months had finally reached critical mass, and the foundation, the deep architectural layer that no one on the current team fully understood, was fracturing from within. By Friday afternoon, 2 government clients had issued formal notices threatening contract termination. The Department of Defense review worth $200 million was suspended pending a full technical audit. Nathan Briggs held 3 consecutive emergency meetings with his engineers, and each one ended the same way, with 20 people staring at code they could not read. Built on logic they could not follow, designed by a mind none of them had ever met. Charlotte sat in her office on the 42nd floor and stared at the diagnostic report spread across her desk. She thought about Kevin's words from the briefing weeks ago. Whoever built the foundation used logic that none of us fully understand. She thought about the chalk equations on the basement wall. She thought about a man who had built this entire system from nothing and then lost everything because he chose his son over his career. And she understood with a clarity that felt like falling that the only person in the world who could save her company was the man she had just pushed out of her daughter's life and out of her own. Charlotte found Daniel on a Saturday morning. He was not at the Whitfield building. His shifts had been quietly reassigned after the board's directive moved to a different commercial property 3 blocks south. She tracked down his new schedule through HR and drove there in her own car. No driver, no assistant. He was mopping the lobby of an insurance company when she walked in. The building was nearly empty on weekends, just security at the front desk, and Daniel working alone under fluorescent lights that turned everything the color of old paper. He saw her before she reached him, and his expression told her everything she needed to know. He had been expecting this. Not her specifically, but someone who needed something from him and would frame it as an opportunity. "Ms. Reed." He did not stop mopping. "If this is about the system your company is built on, I already know it's failing. I could feel it 14 months ago, the first week I started cleaning your server room. The architecture was never designed to scale the way your team forced it to. It needed a fundamental restructure 3 years ago." Charlotte stood in the middle of the empty lobby. "Then you know we need your help." Daniel wrung out the mop and set it in the bucket. He straightened up and looked at her the way a man looks at a locked door he has no interest in opening. "No," he said. The word was not angry. It carried no heat, no resentment. It was simply final, a boundary drawn by a man who had learned through years of loss exactly where his limits were. "Last time I trusted someone in a position like yours, I lost everything," Daniel said. He folded his arms across his chest, not in defiance, but in self-protection, the way a person holds themselves together when the instinct to help is at war with the memory of what helping cost them. "I gave Monarch my best work. I gave Richard Hale my trust. I spent 3 years building something from nothing, and when I needed grace when my son was on an operating table and I needed the world to hold my place for a few months, they erased me. I'm not looking for revenge, Ms. Reed. I'm not bitter. I'm just done. I have a son who needs stability, not another promise from someone who will forget about us when the crisis passes." Charlotte opened her mouth to respond, but Daniel was not finished. "You want to know the truth? I know exactly why you're here. Your Meridian platform is hemorrhaging. Your engineers can't read the base code because I wrote it in a framework I developed myself, and your $200 million defense contract is about to disappear. You need me to fix it. And maybe you will dress it up as doing the right thing. Maybe you'll tell yourself this is about justice. But right now, standing here, you need to answer one question honestly." He met her eyes without flinching. "If your system wasn't broken, would you be in this lobby?" Charlotte felt the question land like a blade between her ribs, because the honest answer, the one she could feel in the pit of her stomach, was that she did not know. She wanted to believe she would have come regardless. She wanted to believe the research she had done, the truth she had uncovered about Richard Hale, the look on Lily's face in the basement, that all of it would have been enough. But Daniel was right to doubt her. Every powerful person who had ever entered his life had come because they needed something, and they had all left the moment they got it. "I don't have an answer that will satisfy you," Charlotte said, "and I won't insult you by pretending I do. But I can tell you what I'm going to do next, and you can decide for yourself whether it means anything." Daniel said nothing. He picked up his mop and went back to work. Charlotte stood there for another moment, watching the clean water spread across the floor in even strokes, and then she left. She did not go home. She went to her office. Over the next 72 hours, Charlotte did something she had never done in her career. She built a case against her own company. She pulled the original licensing agreement for Meridian and compared it against the patent filings Richard Hale had submitted. She cross-referenced dates, Daniel's emergency leave request at Monarch, the patent filing date, the internal memo that stripped Daniel's access credentials. She contacted 2 of Daniel's former co-authors who had left Monarch years ago and were now working at universities on opposite coasts. Both confirmed independently and without hesitation that Daniel Carter was the sole architect of Meridian's core framework and that Richard Hale's contribution had been administrative, not technical. She compiled everything into a file. Then she called an emergency board meeting. The meeting took place on a Tuesday afternoon in the same conference room where Gerald Simmons had shown her the security photograph. This time, Charlotte was the one controlling the presentation. She laid out the evidence methodically. The patent filings, the timeline, the co-author statements, the academic records. She showed them who Daniel Carter was, who Richard Hale was, and what had been done. She explained without emotion that the intellectual property at the heart of Whitfield Technologies, the system their largest contracts depended on, had been stolen from a man who was now mopping floors because the industry that profited from his work had discarded him. The room went silent. Then Gerald Simmons leaned forward. "Charlotte, do you understand what you're telling us? If this is true, if our foundational technology is based on misappropriated IP, we are exposed to litigation that could dismantle this company. Every contract we've signed under Meridian becomes vulnerable. Our valuation collapses overnight." "I understand exactly what I'm telling you," Charlotte said. Helen Garrett shook her head. "This is a legal nightmare. The responsible move is to bury this, settle quietly with Hale if necessary, and restructure the technology under new patents. We do not need to make this public." "Bury it?" Charlotte repeated. She looked at Garrett, then at Simmons, then at the third board member, a man named Paul Whitaker, who had not spoken a word. "You want to bury it. The same way Richard Hale buried Daniel Carter. The same way this industry buries anyone who doesn't have the money or the connections to fight back." She placed both hands flat on the conference table. "If the foundation of this company is stolen work, then everything we've built on it is borrowed time. I would rather face the consequences of telling the truth than spend the rest of my career profiting from a lie." Simmons stared at her. "You realize what this will cost you personally?" "Yes. The defense contract is gone. Our stock will drop, partners will pull out, and the board will have no choice but to suspend your voting rights for at least 6 months while we conduct an internal review." Charlotte held his gaze. "I understand the terms." The vote was 3-1. Whitaker, who had been silent the entire meeting, voted with Charlotte. Simmons and Garrett opposed, but were overruled by the company's disclosure obligations once the evidence was formally entered into the record. Charlotte had made sure of that. She had filed the documentation with Whitfield's legal counsel before the meeting began. There was no burying it now. Within 48 hours, 2 major partners suspended their contracts. The stock dipped 11%. The Department of Defense review was formally canceled. Headlines appeared in trade publications, not front-page news, but enough to send tremors through the industry. Charlotte's inbox filled with messages from colleagues, competitors, and strangers. Some called her brave, most called her reckless, a few called her finished. Charlotte did not respond to any of them. Instead, she waited. On a Thursday evening, exactly 1 week after the board meeting, her phone rang. The caller ID showed a number she did not recognize. "Ms. Reed." Daniel's voice was quiet on the other end. "I read what happened. I saw the filings." Charlotte leaned against her kitchen counter and closed her eyes. "I didn't do it for the company, Daniel." A long breath on the other end of the line. "I know," he said. "That's why I'm calling." Daniel came back to Whitfield Technologies on a Friday morning, not as a janitor and not as an employee restored to a position that had been stolen from him. He came as himself, a man who understood the system he had built and who had chosen on his own terms to repair it. He worked for 11 days. He restructured the core architecture, documented the framework in language the engineering team could finally understand, and stabilized the platform in time to salvage 3 of Whitfield's 5 major contracts. The Department of Defense deal was gone. That damage was permanent. But the company survived. Kevin, the junior engineer who had been warning about the instability for months, was the first person on the team to shake Daniel's hand. "I knew someone else built this," Kevin told him. "The code was too elegant. It didn't match anything Nathan's team could produce. Daniel accepted the compliment with a small nod and went back to work. When it was done, Charlotte offered Daniel a full-time position, Chief Technology Architect, Corner Office, a salary that matched his credentials. Daniel turned it down. "I appreciate it," he said. They were standing in Corridor B, the same corridor where Lily had first found him, where chalk marks still faintly lined the concrete wall. "But I spent 6 years learning what actually matters to me. I don't need a corner office. I don't need my name on a building. I need to be home when Marcus gets back from school. I need to be at his cardiology appointments. I need to be the father he deserves, not the one who disappears into a lab and comes home after he's already asleep." He agreed to a consulting role, instead part-time, flexible hours, enough to provide stable income and full medical coverage for Marcus without sacrificing the life he had rebuilt from the ground up. It was not the triumphant return the industry would have written for him. It was something better. It was his. Richard Hale's name was formally removed from the Meridian patent 8 months later, following an investigation that Charlotte's evidence had set in motion. Daniel's name was restored not as a gift, not as charity, but as a correction of a record that should never have been falsified. On the last day of Daniel's consulting contract, Charlotte found Lily in the basement again. School had let out early, and the girl had gone straight to Corridor B, as if drawn by gravity. She was sitting on the concrete floor next to Marcus, their backs against the wall, a notebook open between them. Lily was explaining a geometry problem. Marcus was sketching a robot that incorporated her solution into its design, a mechanical arm whose range of motion was calculated using the angles Lily had worked out. They were laughing. Daniel stood a few feet away, watching them. He looked up when Charlotte approached. "She doesn't need me anymore," he said, nodding toward Lily. She figured out how to teach herself. That was always the point. Charlotte watched her daughter, this girl who had been silent for so long, who had drifted through a world of expensive tutors and structured schedules like a ghost, now sitting on a basement floor, barefoot, arguing passionately with a 10-year-old about whether a robot could theoretically fly using the mathematical principles of a hexagonal tile pattern. "I spent years trying to control her into greatness," Charlotte said quietly. "All she needed was someone who let her be curious." Daniel looked at her with an expression that held no judgment, only understanding. "Most people don't learn that," he said. "Most people just keep building bigger systems." Charlotte nodded. She thought about the corner office 42 floors above them, the board meetings, the stock price, the contracts saved and lost. She thought about the 6 months of suspended voting rights, the partners who had walked away, the colleagues who no longer returned her calls. She thought about all the things her system had cost her, and the one thing it could never have given her, the sight of her daughter laughing on a basement floor, free and unafraid, and exactly who she was meant to be. She did not regret a single decision. Talent can be buried. It can be stolen, erased, hidden behind a mop and a gray uniform. But it does not disappear. It waits patient and quiet for someone brave enough to see it and honest enough to act. Not every system rewards what it should. Not every story ends with the corner office and the standing ovation. Sometimes the truest victory is smaller than that: a boy drawing robots, a girl solving equations in crayon, and a man who chose his son over the world and never once called it a sacrifice.